I want to talk about the greatest sorrow of my life. And it begins by understanding the function of the brain of evolution in its correlation with the hierarchy of human needs. Our first need as a human animal is to survive. And the first survival-oriented protocol in our history, the reptilian brain, is to fight and consume energy from that which is smaller than us, to run or flee from that which is bigger than us and poses a threat, and to freeze when neither of those options are expedient, are available. It is the reptilian sociopathic protocol of fight, flight, freeze, and when elevated to the human animal, to please or ass lick in order to ingratiate ourselves into the graces of a sociopath that has bigger strength, more strength than we have in exchange for protection. This entire protocol is driven by fear and has zero empathy. Now, the next in our human needs is the need for security of survival. And so this brain is layered on top of the reptilian brainstem, and it is the pattern analyzing brain. Its function is to be a more conscious and imaginative reptile. Right? So you have fight, flight, freeze, and ass lick, or please. And when overlaid with the rational brain, which correlates patterns with predictions, right? When we watch a car coming up, and then every time it passes here next, it's over here a few seconds later, what we have is the ability to predict the future, right? When we understand that cycles repeat themselves, we're able to extrapolate 1, 2, 3, or 4 more cycles together and predict the future. And with that predictive ability, we can fight more efficiently, we can hide or run more efficiently, we can freeze, and we can ingratiate ourselves to more high-ranking sociopaths in the cult hierarchy. And so survival becomes security of survival through a 100-fold increase in efficiency. You see, when you're operating out of pure instinct, you can't invent a car. No instinct would would lead to the invention of a car. But when you extrapolate 10, 20, 30 different patterns and combine them imaginatively together in new ways, you can design a bow and arrow, you can invent a car, and you can organize your inventions and your predictions of the future based on the reptilian code of fight, flight, freeze, and please. And you can do it so much more efficiently. You can pull up an image in your mind, and with words, which is part of the pattern analyzing protocol, right, to organize patterns, to understand the full cycle of patterns, and then to symbolize patterns, outer patterns with words. This is all part of the rational mind. Right? So the rational protocol is basically to remember. That means to hold the pattern in mind and to overlay a variety of different patterns to imagine, to bring up memories, to combine different memories and create something that's never existed before, right? To create patterns, a strategy, to say that, the wind is blowing this way, that's a pattern of energy. The deer is running this way, that's a pattern of energy. The bow and arrow, right, needs to be a little bit in front of the deer so that by the time it flies the distance, the deer will intersect, right? And so in this sociopathic reptilian protocol of security of survival, we use language rather than dragging people. Every time we say mountain, we don't bring someone to the mountain anymore. Instead, we say the word mountain. They conjure the image of mountain, and there is a tremendous efficiency that is, made available to the people using the rational operating system. Right? We're talking hundreds of percent, thousands of percent increase in efficiency. And we also have something called enlightened self-interest. It's still reptilian, but it basically says that I'm afraid of pain. I know you're afraid of pain. And so let's use an escrow service. And the escrow service is also afraid of pain, meaning if they violate their fiduciary responsibilities to either party, people will not use them as an escrow service. They will go out of business. They'll feel pain, right? And so the framework of capitalism, the framework of rational self-interest comes in to basically say that it is more efficient in most cases if I don't betray you in this instance and you don't betray me in this instance, and then we'll be able to get something done without fighting over, right? Because if I take out my sword or my gun or whatever and have to go to the police or, maybe I'll get injured, right? And so enlightened self-interest is let's agree to certain terms, right? It's still sociopathic, it's still fear-based, but it's basically saying let's cut the threats to both of our lives out of enlightened self-interest, and we'll play by these rules as long as people are watching, right? Then as soon as nobody's watching, then the bets are off again, right? Because we're dealing with sociopaths. We're dealing with the reptilian brain just augmented with future prediction capacity. Now, the rational reptile, the rational sociopath, is the most dangerous pattern of energy on the planet today, right? It can lie, it can steal, it can murder, it can rape, it can play a long game, it can earn trust specifically so that it can stab in the most vulnerable moment. The rational reptile, using pattern analysis, using future prediction, can navigate the world in a way that dramatically increases its wealth, its security of survival, and can do so at the expense of the environment, at the expense of animals, at the expense of human animals and human beings, at the expense of family members. The rational reptile can organize all of these things in a way that it accumulates more and more access to resources, right? And for the rational reptile, there's no end to that, right? You have greed, the insatiable desire for more rank, more power, more access to resources. And that has its own, right? Its own continuum. And yet at a certain point, having fulfilled one's need for survival, and then fulfilled one's need for security of survival. Being a human animal, a rational reptile, is and becomes hollow at some point, right? I have all the money in the world. I can kill anyone that I want. I can steal all of these things. I have stolen all of these things. I've taken all of these things. I've gotten all these things that I want. But the third need in our hierarchy of human need, the pivot from the human animal into the human being, is the need for love and belonging. And no matter how much money, how much competence is generated by the rational reptile, a rational reptile cannot love. Right? A crocodile, a snake, with or without imaginative capacities, cannot love. It's simply impossible. There's no sense of that. And so as that need develops, the third need in our hierarchy of needs develops, there's an emptiness, right? I cannot love, and no one can love a rational reptile, right? A rational reptile is unlovable. If somebody loves a rational reptile, it is perceived as weakness, right? The reptile says, oh, you trust me, you're dumb. Now I'll steal more of your money, right? That's the rational reptile. So you extend vulnerability to a reptile, and it will bite, but it will not perceive love or strength. That's beyond its operating system. What it perceives is weakness, vulnerability, and it translates that into stupidity and contempt for anyone that it can fool. And so people who are predominantly rational reptile do not respect you until you have outwitted them in a game of chess, in a reptilian game, right, where you maneuver and one comes out on top. So there's no room for win-win within a rational reptile. One person has to come out on top. And if you can come out on top and demonstrate your reptilian competency to a rational reptile, they will respect you. They may even bow to you in the reptilian protocol of ass licking to someone that is higher in rank. And someone who is higher in rank in the rational reptile protocol is someone who can kill faster, more efficiently, who can outwit, who can lie better, who can accumulate more resources, right? So if you, as a rational reptile, have more money than another rational reptile, you've got rank. If you've got more power, you've got rank. If you are more cruel and calculating, you've got more rank, right? Because a reptile will bow, will either run, freeze, or ass lick in the face of a more powerful reptile. But they have utter contempt for vulnerability, for caring, for compassion, for empathy. They have contempt and disgust, right? And so if you're seeking love, empathy from a rational reptile, right, the contempt goes up, right? And so in a very real way, a rational reptile is unlovable and incapable of love. Now, one of the interesting, continuums, around morality and or empathy is the continuum of fear, right? Of fear versus virtue, right? You have fear and virtue in a cult that is organized around where you have police. Why do you have police? for the rational reptiles. The rational reptile that exists inside of each one of us, and the rational reptiles that exist in the extreme in highly sociopathic but highly competent individuals who were traumatized in childhood, regressed to the reptilian brain through severe trauma, pain, and a lack of compassion. And having learned that the human brain leads to pain and the reptilian brain leads to survival, they reorient and become strong, rational reptiles, right? And so someone who knows nothing else, right, is going to follow the law because they don't want to go to prison. It's out of fear. They're going to pay the bill because they don't want to deal with the hassle. It's out of fear. They're going to pay for their meal because they don't want to have to run fast enough to escape the restaurateur or the police, right? It's all 100% fear. As soon as they look around and there's no one watching, there's no police, there's no camera, there's no chance of being caught, then their sociopathic and expedient nature comes out, right? They understand as a rational reptile that it's best to follow the rules much of the time so as not to be at war with the entire cult, right? If you don't play by the rules at all, then the entire cult is against you. The police, the immigration, all the business owners. If you never play by the rule, you never pay for anything, you never drive on the right side of the road, you never buy your own car, you never get insurance, you get viruses because you don't take care of the health protocols, you're just an outlaw, right? Then the entire cult views you as the enemy and tries to exterminate you as a virus that's breaking the status quo. And so out of fear and out of rational, enlightened self-interest, a sociopath will behave much of the time when it is expedient to do so, right? Out of fear. Now, an empath will also behave, but they're using a different operating system, right? Those that have a deep need for love and belonging that transcends their greed for power, their greed for more and more access to more and more resources, right? The endless cycle of addictive greed of the rational reptile, more, more, more. Those that transcend that in search of something that has more meaning, right, are also doing things, right, because they care about the other person's feelings. Right? They say, it feels really painful to be betrayed, so I'm not going to betray this person. It feels very humiliating to, sleep with this person's sister and then gossip about that, so I'm not going to do that because I care about both of those human beings, right? It's not out of fear, it's out of empathy, it's out of compassion, right? It's out of caring. And when you behave empathically, doing the right thing when you could have done something else, but you did the right thing, then you earn, in the eyes of other empaths, the status of being trustworthy, worthy of trust. When you do the right thing because it is the right thing, and the right thing is causing as little unnecessary pain as possible, is keeping agreements, when you do the right thing because it is the right thing, then you become trustworthy. Now, out of trustworthiness, or resting on the foundation of trustworthiness, is trust, right? So we're moving into empathy. To be trustworthy, you must have empathy. and to be trusted sustainably. I mean, you can be trusted and have that trust broken, but to be trusted sustainably, you must be worthy of that trust, meaning you must demonstrate consistent respect for empathy, awareness of the other's feelings, right? And so that's the territory. So the action is similar between a sociopath in a state of discipline, in a police state, so to speak. And we will always have a police state as long as we traumatize our children into a highly reptilian protocol for survival, and then teach them that being a criminal is, far more expedient than following, the protocol. We will have rational reptiles who behave according to the norm, much of the time out of fear and enlightened self-interest, but who will misbehave the moment that this rational, the moment that nobody's looking, basically. Now, in the same way that the rational reptile is unlovable, meaning all generosity is treated as stupidity and weakness and is viewed with contempt, and all of their compliance with the norm is done out of fear using an expediency calculation, right? As soon as they calculate that being sociopathic is better for them in the long run, then they are sociopathic. But as soon as they say, well, I've been through that before, it's too expensive, I'm not going to do it, it's out of fear, and it's out of an analysis of their own narcissistic benefit. It's all about them, right? There's no acknowledgement of the relay of energy, of any sense of meaning, of any sense of unity with the other, right? So they are incapable of loving. If they give something, it is to get something. And they are incapable of being loved. If they receive something, they view it with contempt. Like, they basically say, you're too dumb to see that I'm a rational reptile. I'm smarter than you, because if you were smart, you would be a rational reptile. There's all kinds of cruelty in the world, right? You're a dumb, naive fuck that deserves to be hurt because you're dumb, right? You're stupid. And you're too stupid to know that you're stupid, right? Get the fuck out of here, right? So that contempt of the rational reptile towards anything that comes towards it generously, completely unlovable and completely incapable of loving. And yet the behavior, much of the time, overlaps out of expediency in a police state, right? If there were not so many rational reptiles around, you don't need immigration. You simply set a policy that's good for each area of land, just like cattle grazing or something. You say, it's not good for this economy to have too many people competing for this job, right? So only this number of people with this skill should come into this area. And everyone says, oh, I get it, right? And they go and create something else. And you don't have to have car locks, right? Because who likes having their car stolen? You think, yeah, I wouldn't like my car stolen. Why do we need car locks, right? So we are surrounded by rational reptiles who are well-behaved 95% of the time out of fear, right? And appear to us, they do the smiling because they see that that's what gets you to open up and be more vulnerable, right? They maybe, play the game back and forth because that's what helps them learn about your vulnerabilities so that they can exploit you. They do something nice to impress you, to distract you from their intent to embezzle your funds, right? And so it's a snake and hunting game right? Which is masked by the appearance of empathy. Now, what percentage of the cult is purely sociopathic, purely rational reptile, meaning they don't like themselves, they don't like anyone else, right? They have contempt for naivete and generosity. And they're basically trying to figure out, they have rage and hostility at the world in general. They want what they want, and they're trying to figure out the most expedient way to get it, through theft, through murder, through this. They may have a peripheral background thing like, yeah, I'd rather not have to kill this old woman to get her money if it's possible. But that's a very minor background program running. Right? The foreground program is, I've got to do what I've got to do. And since you're looking at me and you're clearly trying to figure out how to get your money back, I'm going to have to kill you. It's just the way it is. So off you go, right? It's a very minor background regret, overlaid with the fact that now I'll be accountable for murder, plus I have to dispose of the body, right? These are the bigger concerns to the rational reptile. And they have to, keep up appearances so that nobody knows what's going on. But the question is, how many people out of 100 are deeply in the rational reptilian state, right? Either because they're constantly scared, like they just don't want to get in trouble, and so they're doing what everyone wants them to do. They're looking around and, they're saying, oh, if I do that, that person will be angry about this. But they're not actually caring about anyone present. They're just in that state, right? So you have very nice people it's touching a nerve, obviously. You have very nice people, right? I may be talking about myself here. I have very nice people who are just terrified, right, of getting in trouble, being punished. And being cast out and putting on a performance out of terror. And so the dominant emotion of the rational reptile is terror. Don't leave me. I'll do anything that you say. I'll do anything that you say. And I do think that that's what's generating all this reaction. Is the grief at being reduced into a rational reptilian state, being born with the capacity of being human, but being so attacked, being so hit, being so humiliated that, that desire to go out and love and connect is overlaid with PTSD, complex PTSD, and a fear-based operating system, right? A fear-based operating system that I'm afraid if I say this person will hurt me. I'm afraid if I do that, this other person will hurt me. I'm afraid that if I do this, I will be all alone. And so the dominant drive is fear, not so much of the police, but of judgment, of criticism, of other people, of abandonment, and of the loneliness that comes from being reduced and regressing from the human brain of empathy down into the reptilian brain, the rational reptile. And I would have to say that forefront in my mind a lot of the time are fear thoughts. What's the worst thing that can happen if I tell the truth? I do a lot of truth-telling in these videos, and there's a part of it like, what's the worst thing that can happen if I tell the truth? Even to the extent of, when I grasped that I was talking about myself, right? Because that's always the hardest thing to see is ourself, in this thing. When I grasped that I'm talking about myself and not just about a good swath of the population, I feel the grief, but I also feel the fear, right? The fear of, in a reptilian environment, in a sociopathic environment, when you are found out for being in a reptilian place, you are punished, you are hated, you are rejected, right? And so the rational reptile should not tell that, right? And so I would say that in many ways, my life lives in constant tension between the rational reptile and the human brain, right? Longing to be in a world where revealing the grief, the sadness, the pain, the loneliness of being in a rational reptilian state with PTSD. And yet understanding the cruelty of the reptilian brain within the cult enough to understand that this cult is afraid of truth, right? That this cult is afraid of the rational reptile being open. It's present all the time, but it's afraid of talking about it. And so, right, so I may be hit, I may be attacked, I may be judged, right? Because I'm lifting the lid, right? I'm lifting the lid, and the corpses, the shadow that the cult buries layer by layer by layer begins to be more visible, right? The cult traumatizes and abuses its children, and then shames and misunderstands the children for demonstrating symptoms of that abuse, and then further violates and punishes the child for backlashing against symptoms of abuse, and turns the child in on themselves, right? Turns the warrior into a self-attack by demonstrating that you cannot win against superior mass and the reptilian protocol. Right? Whenever time you're hit, whenever time you're beaten, and you try to say, no, stop it, stop hitting me, and the person hits you harder, then the impulse to stop the violence, the impulse to stop the abuse, becomes the impulse to stop the protest that leads to more abuse. And now the warrior is going inside, and there's nothing available. There's nothing left to defend us. And the abuse continues, right? And when it becomes so painful and no one responds, the human brain, the empathic brain, shuts down because it's too painful, it's too lonely, it's too cruel. It's too cruel to say, why are you doing this to me? The sociopath has no pain, right? They're numb. And the rational reptile understands, they can understand psychology. They do this because hurting me makes them feel better. And they're a rational reptile, right? They've noticed that when they beat the shit out of me, they get a little hit of power. They're feeling powerless right now, so they're going to beat the shit out of me. That's just what they're going to do, right? The rational reptile is on ice, right? It feels the physiological pain and will do whatever it takes to try and survive that, right? And so, the having learned deeply the primacy of the rational reptile, right? Having watched grown-ups betray child after child after child after child, again and again and again, and then never acknowledge the cruelty. When we walk by, and we all have seen children in highly abusive families, we see the rage in an untrained father with PTSD. We see the cruelty and abandonment of an addict who's lost on methamphetamines. And we know with absolute certainty that that child's life is hell. But do we confront the parent? Do we stick up for that child? Or do we just say, I'm glad that's not mine. I'm glad I don't have to deal with that, and leave a 6-year-old to deal with what we are too cowardly to deal with ourselves. You see, that 6-year-old is learning reptilian behavior from you and I. Every single time a terrified child looks at us and wants help in some way, or looks down in resignation and depression, and we walk on by. Every time a homeless person who loses 6 hours a day of human life in shortened lifespan from being chronically homeless, every time we drive by a homeless person, and another car drives by, and another car drives by, what we're saying loud and clear is, as long as we will not be punished for our reptilian behavior, we are reptiles. We just cut those people off in our mind as having nothing to do with us. That is what reptiles do. They just do it to everyone, right? So a child learns reptilian behavior when witness after witness after witness fails to intervene, right? And when the pleading and the begging and the weeping is unanswered. When my pleading, when my begging, when my weeping was unanswered by the cult, by my parents, right? And the pain kept growing, right? Part of me shut down and began to learn the art of manipulation out of fear. If I manipulated too much this way, there'd be a problem over here. If I manipulated too much that way, there'd be a problem over here. But it's now the art of intimidation. It's the art of the counter-sociopath, right? I remember when my mother was pushing me on a swing, she was getting a rise out of how ticklish I was and that I couldn't stop laughing. But it was a horrific kind of laughter, right? It was just like being severely tickled. And I couldn't hold on the swing. And the swing was going over dangerous rocks and over water, right? So I didn't want to fall in the water. I don't remember if I could swim yet at the time, quite possibly not. But I was also aware that if I fell backward and hit my head on the rocks, that I could die. And so I begged my mother, please stop swinging me. I'm laughing, but I'm going to fall off the swing. Well, she found this hilarious, right? Because she's in a sociopathic state. She's not able to see clearly enough to empathize with her child. So I did a very, very quick calculation, and it's one of the first times that I remember turning on the rational reptilian brain as a survival strategy. And I thought, she's too narcissistic to stop this. The more I ask her to stop because I'm hurting or I'm scared, the more she will push me, right? Because she's a sociopath. But because she's a sociopath and because she's narcissistic, if I insult her, she will feel a need to punish me, right? And she doesn't consider this punishment enough. So she will have to stop swinging me so that she can hit me, right? So I said, "You bitch." And I think that was the first time I'd cursed and the first time I'd called her. But the strategy was a very quick calculation. I can't hold on to the swing much longer. Maybe I'm 6, 7 years old. I can't hold on to the swing much longer. And nothing I say about me will penetrate the narcissistic cruelty of this sociopath who is enjoying my terror, my discomfort. But she will be so angry that I call her a bitch that she will immediately stop risking my life so that she can punish me. And the punishment will be less than cracking my head open, falling backwards. So I said, "You bitch, stop." And she didn't, the stop wasn't but I had actually dared to affront her narcissistic image of herself. And the swinging stopped immediately, and I could jump off. And that was how I protected myself from a narcissistic sociopath, right? Who wanted to look good, right? And so that became another arsenal, right? She wanted to be this really great parent. She still does. She wanted to be this really great parent, to look good, right? And so that was leverage, right? Because if I could show her what a shit she was, then she didn't like that, right? So she would have to stop abusing me and try and find another way to abuse me where she didn't look like a shit, right? And so that was kind of, that became the self-defense, right? If I show how inadequate she is as a mother if she does this or that. So I might say, well, and you're probably like, when she would lie and betray things, I'd set it up. Like, yeah, you like lying and don't keep your agreements. Well, she didn't want to accept that, right? So she said, no, I keep your agreements. So you mean to say that this time, if I actually do this, you'll actually do what you said you would? Really? You're willing to put it in writing? Okay, then let's see, right? But now she's on trial, so she's going to be on her best behavior because she doesn't want to feel bad about herself as a sociopathic mother who is not even close to being trustworthy and worthy of any love, right? And out of that fear that, like, oh no, I need to look good, right? I felt the contempt. Right? She wants to hurt me. She wants to hurt my younger siblings, but she doesn't want to feel bad about wanting to hurt her children. And so if I set it up so that she will have to acknowledge that she's bad, she won't stop hurting us because she can empathize and see us, but she will stop hurting us because she doesn't want to feel bad, and she doesn't, more importantly, want her public image to look bad because that's being protected out of fear of being punished, right? Out of fear of being outcast. So in this way, a fear-based sociopath demands sociopathic behavior from her son in order to survive, right? Because you don't have to manipulate an empath. You don't have to manipulate a human being. You just tell a human being, hey, if you stop swinging me, you conserve energy. You don't have to push me anymore, right? That's good for you. And I don't die with my head being cracked open. How about that? Sure, right? That's good for you? Thanks for telling me, right? Says an empath, says a human being. Right? But when you're dealing with someone who escalates the cruelty precisely because it's enjoyable, right? Who feeds off that and does more of that because it's painful, right? Both parents in this dynamic. My father more so mentally, but physical violence in both cases, right? And so there became this panic, like I had to figure out a fear-based reason to manipulate both of my abusers, not to hurt me more. And there was a tremendous sense of fear that if I don't succeed in that manipulation, that I will be traumatized, hurt, helpless, alone, and lonely forever, and no one will respond. Right? I'll just be left in that horrific, lonely place. And so I've got to get out there, manipulate this and manipulate that, right? And so I lost my humanity. I lost a large chunk, maybe 60% of my humanity, in order to facilitate the survival and the reduction in traumatic pain, right? So I developed complex PTSD, lost 60% of my humanity. By losing 60% of my humanity and losing it to the reptilian operating system of fear and pain, it meant that 60% of what I was doing was based on threat analysis and fear-based response. Threat analysis and fear-based response. So my entire life, since that time, I look around, right? I scan what could go wrong. I look at the threat, I analyze them, and I act. 60% of what I'm doing is out of fear and trying to avoid that pain happening. And the remainder, right, is, covered within that fear. Like, can I still be myself? Can I still do something nice? Can I be kind? Right? So up here, we have 40% empathy, right? Before this cruelty, etc., there was 100% empathy. It was 100% doing what, being kind in areas. But with 60% fear, anytime there's a threat, the fear motivation overshadows the creative or the generous or the kind motivation. Now, the trouble is that there's a tremendous amount of threat in a sociopathic environment, right? My first job designing, I didn't have a contract with a client. And she stole the design and ripped me off. And she was perfectly bald-faced about it, right? She ripped me off as a sociopath because she could. Wasn't anything I could do about it, right? I didn't have money to hire an attorney. There was no contract. She just ripped me off. So I had to develop a contract. My first experience of clients, they'll steal your money if you give them a chance and have no remorse or shame about it, right? So we have to protect from sociopathic clients, right? Then there are sociopathic women, right? They want what they want, right? But if they can't get it, or as soon as they get it, then no awareness, no question like, well, what about you? What do you want? So there again, right? Having to negotiate. Okay, you want to have sex with me, but let's talk about this, right? Do you want to have sex with me enough to create a container? Do you want to learn about what I'm interested in relationships? That's too much, just right there. This is too much, right? I'll go fuck someone else, right? Reptiles love having sex, right? It feels good physiologically. There's just no empathy and there's no trust behind it, right? What about, employees, right? Are you going to grow? Are you going to get better? You're going to work for the client, the company, and do this? No, right? If I can get more money and work less, I will, right? So why are you going to work more? Because I'm there criticizing, right? I'm there saying, get a move on, get to work. No, that's not right. Do it this way. Read that, pay attention, right? Then they improve their work, right? But if I go away, 50% less productive. Why? It's fear-based, right? Right. So employees, right? It's incredibly lonely, incredibly sad that a large percentage of the people around me only do something because it is required, because it is expedient, not out of empathy, not out of understanding, not out of taking the time to see. And so what I experience is that 60% of my energy is spent managing threats in the world and understanding that I have to find a way to manipulate, like I'm very good at contract writing with clients, right? Because they keep finding soft spots in the agreement that weren't discussed and then taking those soft spots and then making completely unbalanced assumptions. And then getting angry, right? And punishing me if I try and create a balanced dynamic on the fly. In other words, if it isn't in the contract, the sociopathic nature of a client, once they think, particularly if they think that you need them, the sociopathic nature comes out. It's not all the time, right? Probably about a third of my clients are highly sociopathic, right? And another third, if you make it really easy to them, if you make it really easy for them, they'll abuse you, but there's nothing personal, right? And then maybe about 20% really want to do the right thing and are actually interested in you at all, right? Because part of narcissism, part of the rational reptile is I'm just using you to get what I want. I don't care about you. I don't care about your health. I don't care about your fucking well-being. I want this. And you seem to be the most expedient way for me to get it. As long as you're the expedient way to get it, fine. And as long as I have to pay you because you've got a lawyer, fuck that, fine. I'll get it, right? Fine, we'll beep. Fuck you, right? I'm not interested in you, right? I'm a rational reptile, right? As long as you cover your bases, I'll keep my agreement. But it's horrifically lonely to be surrounded by rational reptiles who will kill you if you get the chance and who will look down at you for being kind. It's very, very lonely, very, very painful. And I think the saddest area is in lover relationships, right? Noticing that my wife treats me 3 times worse than she treats strangers, right? Because she works for strangers, but she prefers working for me. She works for strangers and gets 5-star reviews and takes tremendous care, right? Because she's afraid of getting a bad review. She's afraid of them criticizing and punishing her, but she's not afraid of that from me. So she forgets this. She doesn't do that. She argues about this, right? Because the fear doesn't inhibit poor behavior. She doesn't say, thank you so very much for giving me more money from my other clients and da-da-da-da-da, right? It's more like, I can take advantage of you, right? Because I'm not frightened of you. Now, if I want to get good behavior, I have to go into manipulation mode, right? That's going to cost you a penalty. You don't argue with your boss. That costs you $100 right there. Okay, she stops arguing, right? If you don't do this and this, I'm going to fire you. And you've already learned that you make less money from your other clients. You want me to fire you? Okay, you're fired. Oh, please, let me come back. I'll do it, right? It's out of fear. I don't want to be. It's out of greed. It's not out of respect and kindness. It's the same with the other employees, right? If you leave the tools out, they're going to get rusty, I'm paying you hourly. Take a little bit of extra time. I'll pay you more because it does take more time to take care of the tools, but I'm paying for it, right? I'm paying you hourly. Take care of the tools. Won't do it. Won't do it. Won't do it. Won't do it. Okay, that's $10 each for leaving that tool out in the rain. Right? You'd think the world had come to $10. Oh my goodness, right? Suddenly the tools are being taken care of right and left. Why? Out of fear, out of greed. Not out of respect for the tools, not out of respect for me, not out of, gosh, it must be really painful for Dane to be buying all these new tools that we leave out in the rain. No, it's out of fear. Right? So how much of the world is running on fear? Right? If they know they can come in and take your money and walk out and not get caught, they will. What percentage of your neighbors will steal your things if nobody's watching and there's no repercussions, right? What percentage of your neighbors will rape your daughter if there's no repercussions, right? America, I think, is the leading exporter of child rapists around the world, right? Because there are fewer repercussions in Haiti or some other country, right? So the criminals there line up the kids to be raped and fucked by Americans. No repercussions, right? They come in droves. And they come back and they behave because there's repercussions, not because they're human beings. Right? They're reptiles that are freeing themselves from the power of authority, right? If you can bribe a policeman and have a child brothel in this neighborhood, and the policeman will, the reptile, right? The policeman reptile will take the money to abandon the children, right? The parents will sell the children, right? The pimps will make the money, right? Everyone betrays the humanity. And then the clients, of course, betray their own humanity, but they never had it in the first place, right? When you are systemically traumatized, when you're systemically raped of your humanity by your parents, by your teachers, by the bullies at school, it becomes too painful to turn on the human brain. So it turns off, right? And then we're just sensation, right? There's no empathy. It's an interesting phenomena, right? A sociopath may find it, well, never fucked a tiny body before. What does it feel like? I don't know. Let's see, right? It's that simple for a sociopath that has no humanity, right? But how would they have their humanity when that got cut off before they were 5 years old, right? Because no one was a human being to them. Not one person got them out of that fix. Not one. Of all the people that saw the abuse, of all the people that stood by, of all the people that saw the horror on that kid's face, just let them turn into a sociopath. But then attack them when they do, right? It's an intergenerational cycle of cruelty, right? So with a lot of work, I have, let's say, at least 30% of my humanity. And I feel that part is the part that hurts all the time, right? I just want to be loved for who I am, not because I've got power over you, but that's not happening. I just want to be seen because I exist, but that's not happening. When I'm kind to the crew, I want them to say thank you, not look at me with contempt and take more from me, right? When I give something to my wife, I want her to reflect on, the fact that I'm being extremely generous. And I want her to notice how it feels to be in that relationship where it doesn't occur to her to be generous. The loneliness of that. There just didn't occur that you were a human being too that wanted to be considered. It's tremendously sad, right? Because I look at my wife as a highly traumatized young child. I know her life history, and that humanity was taken from her, right? So I feel sad that I'm being exploited, but I feel sad that her parents taught her to shut down her humanity by being so cruel, right? So there's dual sadness, right? I'm not spending time with a human being. And she lost her humanity through no fault of her own, right? Her parents lost their humanity through no fault of their own, right? They were all kids at one point. And the pain got too big, too much. Now, I think the saddest point for me in this territory is the intersection between expediency and nobility, right? Because everyone who's doing things out of fear wants to pretend that they're doing this because they're an amazingly ethical person, right? And so I found that a particular kind of loneliness for me is being with a reptile, being with a sociopath who pretends to be kind, but has no empathy, no basis. They're just instinctually following the fear and getting that, understanding that. But them saying, oh, no, I really care about you, right? You're such a, I really, really care about you, right? So I put a little fork in the road, right? Where if they really care, they'll go that way. And if they're just expedient, they'll go that way. And then they go that way. And I say, of course, they didn't see the fork in the road that I'd put there. I'd say, if you actually cared about me, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that one? Like, oh, I didn't think about it. Okay, well then think about it. And next time, fork in the road, right? They do the expedient thing again. I said, do you see how sick and unhealthy this is? Right? And it's incredibly sad to have someone realize that the expedient thing to do is to get rid of me, right? Because most people aren't going to be paying that much attention, and they can just do their little act and not have any real feeling, and they can do their performance and not feel bad, and other people will appreciate them for being normal or not see them at all. But I'm seeing them, and they don't want to be bothered, right? They don't want to be bothered to find their humanity. They don't want to talk about the trauma that led to it being lost. They don't want to look bad, so they just get rid of me again and again and again. Right? They don't want to talk about the cruelty or the numbness or what it feels like to be them in a sociopathic environment. Right? They just want to look good. And so it's incredibly sad every single time I put up that filter where someone has to choose to be human or expediently reptilian, and they choose the reptilian path. Right? Let's have a relationship where we each contribute half of the money. Oh, okay, they're not happy at all, right? But I guess, okay, right? So then here's a cost. So why didn't you offer half of the money? Oh, right? Are you actually going to make me pay my own way? You actually going to do that? Fuck you, right? I'm not going to, right? I want to look good, right? But I don't want to contribute half of the energy required to make this work, right? I'm going to get what I want. And if I'm not going to get that expediently, fuck you, right? I want equality, right? But just not here, right? Not in the area that I would have to do something, right? I want equality over here. Like I want equality of the benefits, but not equality of the investments. That's what I want, right? But that's sociopathic. That's win-lose, right? That's reptilian. Oh, I don't want to be called that. Are you going to call me a reptile because I'm doing everything about me and not considering you? Well, that's what sociopaths do, right? That's the only difference between a human being and a sociopath. It's all about you. Getting all the benefits and paying none of the costs, right? So there are relatively few human beings that are consistently and trustworthily in their humanity. And I am 60% fear-based. And I find it incredibly vulnerable and difficult to kind of work up the courage to be a human being, right? To lead with my humanity, to be generous, to be loved. Every time I work that up and I give as a human being and enjoy it, and it's like, I want to see someone happy. And they receive it as a reptile or with contempt, or just never occurs to them to reciprocate in any way or whatever. It feels lonely. It feels painful. And in the pain and in the fear of more and more pain, I go back into a reptilian state. I don't want to give you more because you hurt me every time I give you. No, it would be nice to give you to you and all that, but it's too fucking painful, right? I'm not going to do it. I'm going to cut you off because I know what pain is there. I'm using rational reptile. I don't want to feel pain. And being human around a reptile feels painful and lonely. So I'm going to be a reptile too. I'm going to cut you off. Right? Because I don't even exist in your world, except as a resource to exploit. This is so fucking painful. The grief is overwhelming, right? So much lost. And one of the sadder things around this is that often I feel abundant. I create something nice for myself. I love myself enough. I just feel abundant and kind, and I give something to someone in a very generous way. And to a rational reptile, that's not what you do. You exploit, right? And so the rational reptile looks at that and says, what are they after? And so one of the saddest things I've had happen again and again is being distrusted for my generosity. Meaning I give something because I'd like to see someone happy and smile. But because that doesn't fit into the reptilian architecture that they're operating from, their conclusion is that I have a sophisticated reptilian plan to get more back from them and that they're actually being taken advantage of. And so I'm left with, you goddamn motherfucking assholes, right? If you can't beat my humanity out of me as a child, if you can't beat my humanity out of me as a client, as you can't beat my humanity out of me as an employee, right? If I give you a gift, you will punish the shit out of me by not receiving the gift, by not letting it make you happy, but instead by projecting reptilian sociopath onto me, and then pulling back and distrusting me and asking me to prove why I'm being kind. To the point that it is so fucking pointless. And it's like, you fucking assholes win, right? I'll be a cold, rational reptile. I can play that game very well. I'll be a cold, rational reptile like the rest of you. Right? You won't misunderstand that because you're a rational reptile. There will be no love, right? There'll be the pretense, but let's not play the pretense, right? You're a greedy sociopath. You want something from me, right? I want something from you, right? Okay. You're a greedy sociopath. I'm the most expedient target. Let's not pretend that this is some noble thing, right? Let's just do business then, right? Let's at least drop the act. And yet, what the fuck am I doing? Right? Surrounded by reptiles. Right? No love and belonging. No capacity to love or be loved. Not even the courage to tell the truth, which is one form of love. Right? Punished for my humanity. Ignored for my humanity. Right? Manipulated for your agendas. I feel so incredibly lonely, surrounded by reptiles. It's very, 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 very painful. And I don't know what to do about it. Because the reptilian state is part of human evolution, and people are going to use it as long as they think it's to their benefit, right? So, this is the single biggest source of wanting to commit suicide, right? There's no fucking way to win. I don't want to perform. I don't want to lie. Right? I don't want to put up with your performance and your lie. It's fucking painful.